Our last deep dive is this week's main event between Uppercut and Sawblaze. I think this was a fight that surprised everybody, especially Alex from Uppercut. His facial expressions to this match are priceless.
Yeah, I mean, the hit, the explosion, just clipping Sawblaze and just obliterating Sawblaze like that. I mean, Jameson's an amazing driver. The robot's impossibly robust. So the fact that he basically one-hit KO'd Sawblaze is just insane.
Yeah, the show was talking about the explosion so much that they never really highlight the fact that Uppercut obliterated Sawblaze in a couple of hits.
So let's talk to Alex so he can tell us what's inside Uppercut.
Hey, I'm Alex, and I'm here to talk about this year's version of Uppercut. There were two main upgrades for Uppercut. The first was the addition of these new attachments that we call the horns, and the other was a total overhaul of our weapon motor system. Uppercut's a very pokey-looking robot, and there's a lot of different attachments sticking out at different angles, and those are all planned. They're all there so that Uppercut is unstable and its center of mass is away from its stability plane, so that it always lands and can flail with its wheels. And that gives us control in the fight. As long as our wheels touching the ground, we have some amount of control. You'll notice last year in the Bite Force fight, we didn't have anything that looked like these horns, and unfortunately Uppercut lost because we face planted and could not move, and our wheels weren't touching the ground. The horns are stiff enough so that they won't bend under impact when Uppercut lands on them, and so they won't ever bend into the path of the blade like our previous horns. So one of the unique things that makes Uppercut seem so powerful on TV, it was one of our design goals. We designed it to be able to launch opponents into the ceiling, across the arena, or as we call it, yeeting, rather than grinding or taking little chunks out of the other robot. And so we do that by getting a lot of bite out of our opponent. So if you'll see, with Baby Uppercut, this is a replica of our fist. And so, just like you saw in the Science of Uppercut's Blade segment, this is a single tooth weapon, so we have a lot more time to move into the opponent before the blade actually makes contact. And then the blade itself is also quite wide, so it doesn't actually have a lot of pressure and doesn't cut through the material. Instead, it can sort of catch its opponents, deliver as much energy into them as possible, and then with this angle, it can sort of launch them across the arena, like we've been seeing. So this is sort of a long story, but it starts off with my freshman year with the original Combat Robotics Club team, the Dentist. So, really astute BattleBots fans will know that there was a MIT Combat Robotics Club team called the Dentist that existed at the same time as Sawblaze in their first season. And so with the Dentist, they had these very ambitious goals. There was no tip speed limit at the time, so they wanted to spin their drum at 20,000 RPM. It was going to be powered with the inverter from a Toyota Prius, all these awesome motor science tests, really. But unfortunately, due to time constraints, the Dentist team wasn't able to get the robot finished in time, and so even though they were at filming, they didn't get any fights. But the same sort of technology has existed around MIT. Those same people, they developed their motor controllers, and so this year, we were finally able to use the real science that our teammates have been working on since my freshman year. And so, the big weapon overhaul was with a completely new weapon motor system and a custom controller. So, believe it or not, last year's version of Uppercut actually stored the same amount of energy as this year. The problem was that Uppercut wasn't able to deliver that energy effectively to its opponents due to a pretty silly problem. So we used off-the-shelf brushless motors and controllers because we assumed it'd be more reliable than making our own. But unfortunately, these controllers are not designed for combat, and so whenever we made contact with another opponent with our blade, our motor controller would think of that as a fault, and it would apply full negative torque and prevent the blade from delivering the full amount of energy that it stored, leaving Uppercut seeming a little anemic, especially compared to this year. So to fix this, we made an entirely custom weapon motor system. We designed our own motor, gearbox, and controller, all to go with Uppercut. And that's really the secret to how hard Uppercut can hit this year. So these motors are pretty interesting. We salvaged the motor parts from car parts from a junkyard in Cambridge, and then we designed these housings and gearboxes to go around them. And that's basically it. We built these modules without access to Uppercut due to COVID restrictions. So the first time we were ever able to see if these actually fit in the robot and worked was at the competition, about like a day before the Gemini fight. So that was pretty scary. But luckily things worked out. We did a lot of testing. We kind of designed everything to be as modular as possible so that we'd have the best chance of getting things to work. Frequently, Team Uppercut will be asked, how much torque can our weapon motors produce? And unfortunately, if we give people the answer in Newton meters, it doesn't really mean anything because most people don't have a good sense of what a Newton meter is. So recently we started to tell people that Uppercut has about enough torque to open 7 pickle jars in parallel with our new weapon motors. So if you can think about how much torque it takes to open a pickle jar, multiply that by about 7, and that's how much torque is going into Uppercut's blade. You'll see Uppercut intertwined with yo-yos quite often, and that's because besides building robots, I'm also a competitive yo-yoer, and so I compete all around the world. And I also happen to be 7-time US national champion. In my free time, I design my own yo-yos, my yo-yo sponsor produces them, and then I get to compete with my own designs. For this season, we decided to do something a little bit special, so they actually sponsored Uppercut by making us these Uppercut-themed yo-yos. On one side, you'll see the CAD model of Uppercut, and on the other, you'll see the Uppercut logo and our sponsor logo. So last year, BattleBots discovered that Zach Lytle from Scorpius and I had a little bit of history. And that actually started about 10 years ago at my first US National Yo-Yo contest. So after the contest, all the yo-yoers were in the parking lot of the hotel yo-yoing. And I remember Zach Lytle showing up with what I think is a prototype for his bot bash parties. And then he let the yo-yoers in the parking lot play with that. So that was honestly one of my first interactions with robots.